Hello and welcome to another Senedd Election Special, a co-production of Emma and Tom Talk Teaching and the Impact Podcast. Jane, Finola and I have joined forces in order to interview all the education spokespeople of the major parties contesting the Senedd elections here in Wales in May 2026. Today, it's the turn of the Green Party, and they've put forward Angela Karadog, who's one of their candidates for the election. As ever, we'll hear the interview with me, Jane and Finola, and then after that, we'll come back here to the studio to have some post-match analysis with Dr Gareth Evans, who's the Director of Education Policy at the University of Wales, Trinity, St David. So, first of all, let's have a listen to that interview.
Hello, our special guest today in our election special series is Angela Karadog, who is the lead candidate for Pontypridd Cynnan Merthyr for the Green Party. Welcome, Angela.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so Angela, we're going to crack straight on with the questions, if you don't mind, because we've got a lot to ask you. So we know that standards of attainment in Wales are not where they should be. PISA has put Wales at the bottom of the four nations, and Eston's annual report describes the impact of planning for literacy in all phases of schools as remaining too variable, and the teaching of mathematics and numeracy as having persistent weaknesses. What will you commit to in order to raise standards for pupils in Wales, especially those who are the most disadvantaged?
Yeah, it's an interesting situation, isn't it? So we have in Wales been saying for years and years and years that we're focusing on well-being. We want ambitious, capable learners who are like whole-rounded, ethically informed. Like, we're focusing on well-being, and therefore there's naturally going to be a bit of a slide in those PISA results and things like that, because we're not focusing on, we're not trying to create a Wales of kids who can pass exams. We're trying to create a Wales of well-rounded people, but the headlines don't like that, do they? And so in the Eston report, it also says that we're doing really well on pupil well-being, but that doesn't make the headlines, does it? However, the knowledge gap is a concern, and the standards in literacy are a concern. And yeah, we would better fund education in general. We need, sorry. So personally, I would target evidence-based interventions in the early years, such as like the SSP in phonics, other intervention programs at that level. And then we also need to specify the knowledge that needs to be learnt in that sort of 3 to 16 stage, don't we? Yeah.
Can I just go back and let's have a look at some of those things? Did you say that the Green Party education policy would be to focus on systematic synthetic phonics for the teaching of early reading?
I mean, it's not explicitly outlined in our manifesto, but we have said that we would increase funding in general, and if there are places that need more funding to bring them up to that level, then that would make sense, wouldn't it? I mean, our general is that education should be accessible to all, and we need to raise that sort of funding level to bring all schools up. We don't want schools to be in deficit.
Okay, and with that in mind, actually, I'm going to change slightly our order. Tom, do you want to come back on some of those questions around funding?
Yeah, we had a question about those deficit budgets because, as we all know, more and more schools are starting to operate with deficit budgets. And we're interested to know, you've mentioned a lot about spending. Would that include a commitment to ensure that no school in Wales is put in the position of having to run a deficit budget, meaning that they can't do all of the things that they want to do for our young people?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, we are still working on the finer points of our manifesto, but that aim would be that things are funded properly, that teachers are funded properly, that schools are funded properly. So yeah, that would be our aim, to increase that line so that we're not starting on the back foot, that we're actually well funded and properly funded to do what we need to do.
Can I just jump in here as well? It's that thinking about the makeup of the Senedd, and potentially having possibly a deciding vote, because obviously the Green Party is probably not going to be leading the administration, is not going to be in government, but it could be a situation as we had in the previous Senedd term, where we had Kirsty Williams, who ended up being the Education Cabinet Secretary, and she was just the sole Lib Dems. So what is it that you would want to see a government doing in terms of funding, and how would you use your Green Party deciding vote if that's how it worked out?
If we had a Green Party deciding vote on funding education, then we would absolutely be putting more funding into education. The entire of everything is based on the education of our children and future generations, isn't it? So it's a no-brainer. This is where education and health, that's where the funding needs to be.
Okay, Jane.
Shifting now across to the teaching profession, because I think we've got to accept that, our teachers are the driving force of the standards that we want to see rise in schools. And there's been an enormous shift in the way that teachers are supported to provide the education that every child deserves over the last few years. Things like, inspection has moved from this cycle to once in every 6 to twice a cycle. Consortia and the consortia role has changed. So it's no longer driving professional learning, it's back to schools with the help of the LA. And we've got these new bodies, DISCI and ADNOD, which are new professional learning organisations, which is early days. Given this very fractured nature of the current professional learning landscape in Wales, what will you do to ensure that professional learning support that teachers are provided with is really the support that they need?
So we are going to promise a minimum hours professional learning. So we would work obviously with teachers and teaching unions to make sure we get it right, but we would want to see, because there isn't currently a minimum hours of learning, and we would want to see that professional development, professional learning time protected and increased so that all staff get that opportunity to focus on things that are necessary and also what they're interested in studying in their own lifelong learning.
Okay.
Would that be not just teachers, but obviously the support staff that go across the board?
Okay. Tom, is there anything else that you wanted to ask?
Just on the question of retaining people in the profession, we hear a lot about wanting to recruit more teachers because we know that we're in something of a recruitment crisis here in Wales. But there's no point recruiting them if we can't retain them. And there's increasing evidence that teachers are finding the profession an increasingly difficult one to stick in for any length of time. Does the Green Party have any suggestions or policies or sort of beginnings of policies about how those teachers who are already in the profession can be retained?
So I did PGCE secondary chemistry in Swansea in 2006, so just coming up to 20 years ago, my goodness. And since left the profession because I work for an independent education research company at the moment, also Wales based. I have better paying conditions for still researching and still doing stuff that I'm into. I miss that learner engagement, but so I absolutely see where and many of my friends who trained at a similar time are leaving or have left or just can't hack it anymore. But what we would do is we would look to change that pupil teacher ratio a bit. So we either get in more classroom support in the larger classrooms, or we reduce the classroom sizes, just because I think that number, we're well above the European average of pupils per teacher. And we haven't got the support staff in there. We've got pupils with additional learning needs so teachers are also taking the brunt of underfunding in the health service. You've got the behaviour problems, which are probably health problems and neurodevelopment problems. So I think more staff, fewer pupils to staff, just gives you that extra room to breathe and focus on what your learners need.
And just to pick up on the question from the start about standards, you know, the OECD data shows that things are not sort of moving in the right direction at the moment. And you said that, you know, it's important to focus on the well-being of pupils, and that perhaps the OECD results make for a snappier headline. Do you feel that curriculum for Wales, you know, that's come in the last 5 years, has that been a success from your point of view? Would the Green Party be looking to stick with it? And the reason I'm asking that is that point you made earlier about having more specific things in the curriculum would imply that you think it needs changing. And also, I'm just interested to know whether you think we should just refocus on pupil well-being and not worry so much about those standards.
Yeah, it's a tricky mix, isn't it? Because OECD also say that, you know, they were very positive about the whole curriculum for Wales, about the way we were doing things, about that ambitious approach. So I think as Wales, we tend to be not very secure about ourselves, and we like to compare ourselves to other people. And I know there was a recent article saying, oh, well, this approach has failed Scotland, it's failing in New Zealand, therefore we should, you know, back out and run away and start things differently. So I don't think we need to completely scrap it. I think there's a lot of really good things in it, especially the way we deal with the whole holistic view of having the well-being of pupils, the well-being of the individuals at the centre of it. I think it might need some tweaks, but I also think it's too early. So I've got my eldest is just in year 11, so she's the last cohort of the old GCSEs, and my youngest is year 8, so will be coming through the new lot. I'm not seeing much difference between the two of them, between what they're doing. And yeah, I think it's a little bit too soon to tell and to scrap it and to run away. But it needs to be evidence-based. We need to look at what actually happens with this cohort coming through. Based on the evidence.
And the Green Party's 2024 general election manifesto for Wales talked about reforming the inspectorate. Is that Estyn you've got your eye on? And if so, how would you want to see them reformed?
What are they inspecting? Are they inspecting the ability of the school to do really well on that one day or that 1 week that they're in? So my partner's just been through an inspection, and I think teachers still feel like they need to sort of put on this magic show of being amazing and wonderful that 1 week, and it's a lot of stress and it's a lot of paperwork, and it's not fair. What are we assessing? Are we assessing that schools have got good plans and good standards and good levels of teaching in place, and that the pupils are doing well, or are we assessing that kind of snap one-off?
So just following on from that, that's an interesting approach to how we think about what is the quality of education like. So going back to the idea of standards, is that obviously teachers understand that education is more than just pupils passing exams, that it is about supporting the whole child. And I think even though Curriculum for Wales is new, it's something that teachers have always been focused on, making sure that children become more confident adults. But how do you ensure, or how would the Green Party ensure that Wales is not being left behind? Because as it currently stands, the state of reading particularly is way behind in Wales, where it needs to be in comparison with England, Scotland, Northern Ireland.
Yeah, like I said, I would want to see those targeted interventions in the early years. And I know we've got a bit of a post-COVID issue as well, haven't we? Where we had that sort of those couple of years where kids missed out. I know my daughter's year particularly, they're great, but they've got some basics missing. They're missing capital letters and full stops, and they shouldn't be at that point in year 11. It's just that something. So we haven't got anything that kind of goes back and supports.
Can I just ask you? You mentioned targeted interventions. What kind of thing are you talking about?
So there's like it was the phonics one.
SSP.
So I'm
Systematic synthetic phonics.
That's it. Things like that. I know I have family who do learning support, and
Okay.
sort of working with small groups and having those targeted things that work out what's missing, what's wrong, what do you need to learn.
Okay.
That level of intervention that's focused on the individual. Yeah.
Right. Before we finish, I think that we've asked all of the questions that we had available. Is there something, if you're talking to our listeners who are head teachers and teachers, potentially parents as well out there in the internet world, is there some message that you want to send to them about what the Green Party believes, what the Green Party would like to see in education beyond the Senedd elections?
Yeah, let me find my screen. Yeah, education it's the bedrock, isn't it? It's the cornerstone for having our greener, fairer, better future. It should be accessible to everybody, no matter what background, no matter your ability to pay for funding. That shouldn't be an issue. That shouldn't even be part of the calculation. We want affordable childcare. We want a good student experience. We want embedded culture, art, sports, environment. Yeah, we want a good, strong. Every child, every young person just has that good, stable footing and is able to be educated well and be able to stay and work in Wales. And yeah, we just want a better future for us all.
Angela Karadog, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll look forward to talking about it in a little bit more detail when we look at them in all the round. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank
You so much for having me.
So that was our interview with Angela Karadog from the Green Party. And as ever, with post-match analysis, I'm joined by Dr Gareth Evans from the University of Wales, Trinity St David, where he is the Director of Education Policy. And Gareth, I'll be honest with you, I don't feel that interview went spectacularly well.
Yeah, different to some of the other interviews that you've conducted, Tom, I think it's fair to say. And that, I mean, one of the giveaways for me was the fact that Angela kept talking about myself, in my view, I think it is my feeling that, I mean, I got the sense that it was more about her opinions on education than the party's policy on education necessarily. And that mightn't it, that simply there isn't enough policy yet drawn or to go on. So I did feel for her a bit in that she'd been put up to doing this interview with three very knowledgeable and forthright people in their questioning, and quite right to you as well. But yeah, her answers weren't as developed as other people that you've had on this series, and I think that's disappointing. But again, you can't really criticise the lady herself, because she's gone on, she's done her level best, she's given her views on things, but as I say, they may not necessarily be representative of the broader party's views.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely lay this firmly at the door of the party itself, because, as you say, there's no sign of anything policy-wise there. We've got an interviewee who obviously has got some sort of background in working in schools, who's obviously come up on the list when this interview request has come in, and has just been left in a policy vacuum, as you rightly say, trying to fill that vacuum with her own opinions about education, which doesn't feel like something that a political party should be doing. It feels like education is so far down their priority list that they haven't got to it and appear to have no intention of getting to it.
I think, to be polite, this didn't feel like a party preparing for government, did it? This didn't feel like a party that has a plan. I mean, it's early days, and look, the Green Party traditionally in Wales haven't been that big a political force, have they? So they haven't been in this position before, where they could yet be a kingmaker in government, let's not forget, where they could have a significant role in determining what happens if, as we've said before, the polls are right and there is a sort of left-leaning government going to come in. The Greens could very well be called upon as a junior partner. So if they haven't had to deal with that amount of scrutiny before in Wales, they might well do now. So I mean, moving forward, this is something that they're going to have to up their game on.
And that's a vital point, isn't it? And for the benefit of any listeners who are not familiar with the Welsh system, we have a proportional system here. We don't have that kind of first past the post system that they have in Westminster. We know from the Caerphilly by-election, the Senedd by-election back in October, that there would appear to be a block of progressive voters, as you might call them, willing to vote tactically to keep Reform UK out, who've had a surge in the polls. We know that the Green Party have been a big beneficiary of some of the stuff going on the left-leaning progressive side of things, over the border in England. And so, as you rightly say, we could find ourselves with a Green Party member of the Senedd filling those seats in government, exactly as we saw when the Lib Dems were brought in to help the Labour government take power a little while ago. And who was that Lib Dem minister? It was Kirsty Williams, who was the Education Minister.
Yeah, I mean, very good points, Tom, and a good recollection of recent political history in Wales. But again, maybe let's end this point by saying, Angela put herself forward into the fray. It's not an easy thing to do with three people who are primed and ready for a very in-depth conversation on education, and I credit her for doing that. She didn't have to do that. She didn't have to, green light your invitation for an interview. But yes, I think the party, let's say, to put it mildly, will have to come up with some clearer policy direction moving forward.
And even in the absence of policy direction, I find myself asking if it's a good strategy. If we think about that first answer that we got about the school standards in Wales, all the indicators have been moving in directions other than the directions that we would like over the past 10 years or so. To describe that as just a sort of quick headline for the media and suggest that it's okay because the kids are happy felt not like a masterclass in political strategy, even in the absence of hard policy, if I'm totally honest.
I'm just not sure that she fully grasped what the curriculum is all about, and the suggestion that well-being and sort of academic qualification and standards, for want of better a phrase, are sort of mutually exclusive, I think is inherently wrong. And if somebody like Graham Donaldson, for example, would argue vociferously against the idea that you can't have good, healthy, happy kids and no academic acumen. I mean, that's just bonkers, frankly. So the suggestion, and I just thought it was a misunderstanding of the essence of the curriculum. But maybe that feeds into what we were saying earlier, that there is a lot. I mean, education is a very developed brief, isn't it? I mean, when I first sort of got into the field myself, I just thought it was about fluffy pictures of children and teachers going about their work. There is a lot that goes on that people don't really understand. Your average Joe on the street won't understand. And I think getting across the detail, as we've said before in some of these conversations, is really important. And it helps, doesn't it, to have a good idea of what some of the key issues are on the ground. It's all well and good knowing teachers or being married to teachers. My wife used to be a teacher. We've all got connections to the education system, but unless you live it, you breathe it, you work in it day to day, you don't really get a true sense of what is happening on the ground. And that, I mean, I'm segueing here, but I always say of ministers and particularly of civil servants, you need to get out into school, you need to get out into the system, you need to speak to kids, you need to speak to parents, you need to speak to teachers to get a real understanding of some of these thorny issues that we need to iron out. And until you do that, you're just going to be talking at this sort of high level, this superficial level. We need more teachers, we need more money, we need to raise standards. These are all catchphrases that anyone could regurgitate. We need detail, we need some idea of action and some semblance of hope. All of us in the system have been so battered, I think, for a number of, at least not the teaching profession, been battered for so long, over so many years. We need some sense that things are going to change, that conditions will improve, that workload will improve, and that we're going to be given the support that we need. So yeah, I think just constantly talking in catchphrases is not really helpful.
I mean, the other thing that sort of bound together various of the responses were things that I'd probably describe as very expensive and more complicated than they at first seem. I mean, we had things about lowering class sizes, increasing non-contact time, some sort of promise about dedicated professional learning time. I mean, these are all very expensive things, and these are all things that sort of have a real devil in the detail once you dig into them.
Yeah, and we were told again, weren't we? Angela mentioned that we need to get every school out of deficit. Well, that's going to cost, particularly in the current climate, a significant amount of money. Like you, I picked up on the minimum hours professional learning, which I actually like. I think that's a really interesting idea and something we could explore further. But one could argue that we've done that 2 or 3 times before. We've had the New Deal for teachers a decade or so ago that fell flat on its face. We've had the national entitlement in more recent times under Jeremy Miles. Again, things that promise a lot, but seldom deliver. So you are right. Funding is very often the determinant in all of these things. And actually, one of the other things that Angela mentioned, and I would actually take some sort of umbrage with, was her reference to reducing class sizes, which again is something that we've gone after so many times before. Well, in Wales, I was going to say internationally, but in Wales, and Kirsty Williams did it a decade or so ago as a pilot, I think, from memory. Didn't go anywhere. So if it didn't go anywhere, one assumes that it didn't really have the impact that she had hoped it would have. But internationally, the evidence is so mixed. I mean, I can't think of possibly streaming another one. There aren't many things in education that are as divisive as smaller class sizes. People just can't decide whether or not they're effective or not. So I do think there are better ways of spending our scarce resource. So if that was something that the Green Party ended up pursuing as a policy idea, I would sincerely hope they build an evidence base for it, or perhaps look at other ways of better supporting learners in classrooms, like, for example, just deploying the staff that we have a little better, getting the teachers to work in smaller groups. It doesn't have to be about reducing class sizes from 30 to 25. In fact, the evidence, the EEF says, I'm pretty sure, that class sizes or reducing class sizes from 30 to 25 makes next to no difference. To get any traction at all, you've got to reduce class sizes by 10. You've got to drop them to below 20. And again, imagine the cost that would involve. So, a sort of well-trodden idea that we've had bandied about in education for literally decades, but with very little return for money. So we've got to think, I think, longer and harder about what we can do, what are our best bets in education, and what's going to give us more bang for our buck.
And just finally from me, because I know it's something that interests you and that you've published about, while digging around doing my homework for this interview, I dug out this suggestion from the 2024 General Election Manifesto, the UK General Election Manifesto, but it was their Welsh document about reforming the inspectorate. I'm still no clearer on whether that was relating to Ofsted over in England, or given that it was published in Wales in 2024, they actually have their sights on Estyn, given that there was this thing about well-being versus standards earlier on the interview. I thought that was potentially a fertile avenue of conversation, but I didn't get very far.
No, you didn't, and it's a shame that you didn't, because I think if that was in the manifesto, and I don't doubt for a second your insight on this, it is absolutely something that we need to probe a little further. And I'm surprised actually that she didn't have a great deal more understanding of what that meant in a Welsh context. Was it a throwaway line that they hadn't really considered? As I say, the Green Party weren't a serious player 4 or 5 years ago in Wales. Were they just dropping in stuff from England at sort of national branch level into the Welsh manifesto and hoping nobody would notice? I don't know, but it certainly needs review. And what I would say is, if it was intentional and it did actually refer to reform of Estyn, then why on earth haven't they cited Donaldson's, significant review of Estyn, very significant and sweeping changes to Estyn in the last 2 or 3 years? It's not like Estyn isn't changing, isn't reforming, isn't doing things differently. They are. I mean, some would argue that they're not going far enough in certain areas, but you can't doubt that they haven't changed. So again, it suggests to me that the party hasn't maybe done enough homework in this area. It needs to go away, I think, and maybe return to the classroom itself, shall we say?
Thank you, Gareth. Well, that's our post-match analysis of the Green Party interview. Hope you enjoyed that. As ever, we will be back with some more very soon. Bye for now. You've been listening to a Senedd Election Special brought to you by Emma and Tom Talk Teaching and the Impact Podcast. Today's guest was Angela Karadog from the Green Party, and you also heard Jane Miller and Finola Wilson from Impact Wales, Dr Gareth Evans from the University of Wales Trinity St David, and me, Tom Breeze. The interview was produced by Darren Evans.